Our survey of normal forms has to start at the ground floor with first normal form, but stay tuned to find out why I consider it to be overrated. Welcome to this video on database normalization. My name is Kevin Fiesel, and I am the proprietor of QUOTATION Services LLC, a consulting firm which specializes in work all across the data platform space, especially SQL Server. In the prior video, we started laying the groundwork for database normalization. Now, let's head back into the classroom and pick up where we left off. Welcome back to the second week of class. I'm glad to see that most of you haven't dropped out. Administration says I need to keep the majority of you strung along to get paid, so I've got incentives and all. Now, let's talk about the first normal form. First normal form, or 1NF, is all about key rules in the shape of tuples. On the screen, we have a formal definition of first normal form. Suppose we have some relvar R which has a heading H. That heading contains a series of attributes, each of which has an associated data type. If we are in first normal form, then each tuple will follow the heading and therefore have one value for each attribute and the correct data type for that attribute. In other words, let me show you a relation here on the whiteboard. On it, we have a heading with three attributes. The first has a name of artist and a data type of character data. The second has a name of album and is also character data. The name of the third attribute is release year and its data type is integer. Then we have three tuples. Each tuple has one value per attribute and must follow the data type rules we've laid out for each attribute. If I want to add a new tuple to this relation's body, I need to make sure that it too follows the rules of the relvar's heading. I can perform those checks, see that they do in fact match up, and introduce this tuple to the relation's body. There are a few rules around first normal form that follow from its academic depiction. The first rule is that new tuples must match the existing relvar's heading. Second, all tuples must have values for all attributes. Hopefully, one of the smart kids falling asleep in the back perked up at this because it's a pretty big deal. Null is not a value. Null is the absence of a value. Therefore, if you have nulls in your tuples, you are not in first normal form. Next up, no duplicate tuples are allowed. That's because we live in the world of set theory, and sets prohibit duplicate tuples. I'll save the discussion of surrogate versus natural keys for now, but that does play into the question of duplication and whether surrogate keys belong in a logical data model. The correct answer is maybe. Next, attribute order does not matter for tuples. That's why, on a select or an insert or an update statement, we can choose whatever attribute order we want. This is a consequence of working with tuples. They don't have an inherent ordering. Similarly, tuple order does not matter for relations. This follows from set theory. Elements in a set have no inherent ordering. That's why if you want a particular order in your select statement, you need to include that ordering in your order by clause. Our final rule for first normal form is that all attributes in a heading are regular. That is, each attribute has a name, has a data type, is not hidden from users, that kind of thing. Now, some relational database management systems, like Oracle, will fail this rule immediately, as each table has at least one hidden column. Others, like SQL Server, will only fail if you use certain functionality, such as graph tables, or if you create a custom table with hidden columns. Here's a pop quiz I'm going to spring on you. Is this album relvar in first normal form? I'll give you a few moments to read the contents. Now here's the answer. Yes, it is in first normal form. Repeating groups are not a violation of first normal form. That statement is going to be a bit controversial. I know because here's a slide from an old normalization talk I used to deliver. Here's the fact. I was wrong then. Going back to C.J. Date's Database Design and Relational Theory book, 2nd edition, he mentions that repeating groups is a term he came up with and subsequently recanted. The term itself was confusing, and he did not intend us to interpret the term the way that most of us naturally did, so the best advice is forget about any idea of repeating groups violating first normal form. What we can say about this relvar is that, based on its design, each album must have exactly 2 artists and exactly 3 genres, because we cannot have null here. Is this what our business people need? If it is, then great, we're in first normal form. But what if it isn't? What if we can have up to 3 genres and some indefinite number of artists on our album? In that case, this relvar design, although it does fit first normal form, does not adequately reflect reality. By the way, how do we fix this relvar if we can have up to 3 genres, but not every album needs to have 3 genres? That's something we're going to cover in a later video. Much later, as it turns out, but we will cover it. Now let's go back to the tier maker list. First normal form is in the B tier. Now let me justify its position. First normal form is either trivial or nearly impossible, depending on how strict you want to be. In some database systems, it's going to be impossible when you get pedantic and consider hidden attributes. In none of them, however, can you violate the core kernel of first normal form. Each relvar has a specific heading with a specific set of attributes, and each tuple in the body must have corresponding values for each of those attributes. If you don't allow null to infect your database, and you have primary key constraints for every relvar, you're basically in first normal form, no matter how shoddy your design is otherwise. Anyhow, that's all I've got to say about first normal form. Class dismissed. That's going to do it for this video on database normalization. Stay tuned for the next video where our intrepid professor tackles one of the 2 most important normal forms. We'll have links and show notes in the description below. And until we see each other in the next video, take care.